Hey guys, Zyger here. I just wanted to do a guide on the Stampede build for Crusader as of current for patch 2.1.2. Now the Stampede build is still viable. I don't think it comes quite as close to Condemn in terms of its ability to clear the highest greater tier rifts, but it's still very viable spec, very useful, and it's slightly less gear dependent. So I'm going to go down some of the basics of the Stampede build, namely the skills, the passives, cover the gear, the gems, Paragon Points, and also talk about how to do greater rifts as the Stampede build, and also discuss some strengths and weaknesses that separate the Stampede build from the Condemn build. So let's start off with that. Let's start off with skills. So first of all, the bread and butter attack of this build is Phalanx with the Stampede rune. Phalanx allows you to shoot 3 rows of horses twice if you have a particular item with it, that being the Unrelenting Phalanx. If you don't have the Unrelenting Phalanx, you'll see that only 3 horses shoot out. Basically, it does basically twice the amount of damage if an opposing enemy gets hit by all 3 horses. Stampede rune is a physical rune. It also is useful in the fact that it stuns enemies for 2 seconds, so this is a fantastic build for keeping enemies stunned, out of your way. It's a long range build, so you don't have to stand next to the enemies whatsoever. So that's your bread and butter attack that this whole build is really based around. Steed Charge is a utility that you can also have with this build that just allows you to get out of certain attacks. With this build, you'll be susceptible toward a lot of different kinds of range attacks. Cold, arcane, electric. I use the endurance rune commonly because it just extends the duration of Steed Charge, which is pretty useful. Now, Iron Skin is an ability you can use with this too. There's really 2 viable options as far as runes. There's Steel Skin, which extends the duration, so you have 3 more seconds of the duration, or Flash, which is really useful in high tier rifts because this allows you to walk through enemies and also walk through walls. So it's fantastic. It really allows you to stay alive, really keep out of attacks, and any player that plays greater rifts up at that level will tell you how good it is to be able to walk through enemies. It's so useful. The next ability we want to talk about is Provoke. Provoke is basically a bread and butter ability that allows you to generate wrath. So it's really a cooldown based wrath generator, and the charged up rune just allows you to do a little bit more damage as lightning. Now, in my other video, I talked about the Condemn set would use Too Scared to Run. Now, Too Scared to Run is fantastic, but in this build, it doesn't have as much use because you're rarely close enough to be able to make use of it. Make use of its movement speed and attack speed debuff. So, we run Charged Up as an ability to give you the chance to do a little bit more damage as lightning. Laws of Valor, Unstoppable Force. Laws of Valor, Unstoppable Force is pretty much a required skill and talent for almost any type of Crusader. The Horse or Stampede build is no exception. It makes it so that you are able to have a battery Wrath generator. This is your Wrath generator. While the law is empowered, you're going to gain a ton of wrath back. And in conjunction with this next ability, that really leads you to be able to consistently generate wrath. Akarat's Champion with the Prophet rune is used just as it is in the Condemn spec. Basically, it not only gives you a huge amount of armor, which adds to your mitigation and survivability, but it also allows you to have a basic resurrection when you die as a Prophet. Akarat's Champion will pop when that occurs. Thanks for following there, of course. And you'll be able to have that ability. So, I wanted to talk about the passives. Let's go into that. Heavenly Strength. This is required for any good spec as well for Crusader. Allows you to wear a 2-handed weapon and a shield at the same time while having a minor damage penalty. Finery. You get 1.5% strength for each gem socket into your gear. Most Crusaders run with 10 or so sockets. Some people even have a socket in their shield, so you can see how beneficial this is. Without finery, you lose a ton of strength, and most people think of strength as just something that adds to your damage, but actually strength gives you some toughness as well, so it's a very useful thing to have. Now the next two skills are not as significant as these, but very much do help for this build. This one allows your phalanx to do an increase of 20% damage, which is very necessary for the spec. Phalanx is what does all of your damage in this spec. Other than phalanx, the only other things that do damage as this spec is the procs. It also reduces the steed charge cooldown a little bit, which is pretty cool too. I mean, it's not incredible, but it's pretty cool. Long Arm of the Law. Now, I've seen some people be able to replace this with Indestructible if they have just incredible Wrath regeneration, but I do not. So Long Arm of the Law extends your Wrath or Laws of Valor so that you can gain more Wrath over time as a battery, as your generator. Remember, this is your chief generator. This extends its duration, and you'll be spamming the horses like this constantly, and it requires a lot of Wrath. While the Law of Valor is going, you can see that my Wrath is almost not depleted at all. However, when it does fade away, you can see that it does start to take my Wrath away in large chunks. So you're going to want to have that. If you can replace this with Indestructible, it's really nice, but this build is innately able to survive and withstand a lot because you have your Iron Skin going at the same time. Your follower, of course, he has a Unity. And let's go into the gear choices for this build. So, first things first, if you can, you want to run 6-piece Icons. 6-piece Icon set. Simply put, you can get around it if you wear 5-piece and a Ring of Royal Grandeur instead of the SOJ, which will allow you to roll or wear a Leoric's Crown to make up for some of the cooldown loss. You can wear the Leoric's Crown, put in a diamond, and get some of that as a benefit. But I have enough cooldown where I don't really need that. However, I still do not have enough cooldown reduction to run Akarat's Champion 24/7. Remember, Crusaders need 55.6% cooldown reduction to do that. So, just as it is with my Condemned Crusader, I have a brief period in which I will lose the Akarat's Champion buff and cannot produce it again. If I was able to get a cooldown roll on a Unity, that would change, of course. Most Crusaders run with a Vigilante belt. Now, the Witching Hour is actually alright with this build. It's much better than the Condemned build in this build because attack speed is actually decent in this build. Attack speed actually helps your damage in this build, whereas in the Condemned spec, it's close to the useless. Not quite useless, but it's close to useless. So it's very, very nice in this build if you can use it, but you can see that my cooldown reduction goes down so low. I'm going to wear it. So, Furnace is the weapon of choice. Even better, Ancient Legendary Furnace. Right? If you have a Furnace, you want to have a percent damage roll, a strength roll, and a cooldown roll if possible. That's optimal. Best secondary rolls are freeze on hit or life after each kill, generally. Those are the two best. This build is not as weapon dependent as the Condemned spec, which is pretty cool. Because almost any Ancient Legendary weapon can basically replace the Furnace. A Furnace is fantastic against the Rift Guardian because of its increased damage against elites, but still, you can do a very good job with something like, just trying to think, like Ancient Legendary Stalguard's Decimator, or a very good replacement is an Ancient Legendary Heart Slaughter if you have one. I don't. But there's pretty good replacements. The shield is not replaceable. The shield is going to be necessary. You're going to want the same rolls I have. The shield has the best rolls you can really get on this shield. They're not optimal. I'd love to have Phalanx 15 and crit hit chance 10, but I can't complain. It's hard to roll this shield like that. Strong Arm Bracer. Alright. Strong Arm Bracer is going to add to your damage because the mobs get displaced. You want physical in this build. This build's physical, whereas the Condemned build is holy. Your neck, the best thing to have is physical, crit hit damage, and crit hit chance with a socket. You can replace the elemental physical roll with strength. Strength's still pretty good. And if you get an ancient legendary one, you can roll up to, 1,000 strength. So it's really quite awesome to have that. It comes close to matching a 20% physical roll. This one is a Hana fact, so it's not the best one you can get. I think that Hellfire amulets are better with this build because you can get something like Indestructible or Vigilant. Something like that's a little bit nicer for this build than Condemn in my estimation. But if you can't get that, immunity necks are great. And the most relevant immunity necks for this build is probably still Mara's or a Zephyrian amulet. Those are probably the two best for creators and Crusaders in general. You're gonna want to run Unity and Stone of Jordan if you can get cooldown close to what mine is, or even a little bit above. If you don't have that much, you might have to end up sacking Stone of Jordan and wearing something like a Royal Ring of Grandeur. So that's the dream, to have 55.6% cooldown without that. And that's really how it goes. Now the gems. Alright, Mirene, Teardrop of the Starweaver. This is the optional gem in this build. There is more debate in this build about what the third best gem is as compared to the Crusader. I choose to run Mirene because it provides an additional amount of single target damage against enemies. You're going to want that for Rift Guardian bosses. It's really nice to have. And the horses proc it quite a bit. You're not holy as this build, but still, it's very good. Bane of the Trap. This is a gem that almost any spec uses. It's just a straight up damage buff that's really nice and gives the slowing aura. Stone of Jordans has the Pain Enhancer, which is really the marquee gem of this build. Pain Enhancer does a huge amount of damage in the form of bleed, plus with Blood Frenzy, your horses start to go super quick. Boom, boom. Now, you sometimes even have to watch your Wrath during this stage because you can lose too much Wrath if you're not careful, especially if you're wearing something like a Witching Hour, which increases your attack speed as well. So, one more thing about the Akon's pieces is that you want to have Phalanx damage rolled on both your helm and your boots, and your shield, actually. 3 pieces that can roll Phalanx damage. It's fine to do red gems in all the slots. It gives you a lot of strength. If you're lacking in mitigation, I recommend, utilizing Iron Skin and Unity first before bringing these to diamonds. You can bring these to diamonds, so that's fine. Diamond in the helm because it gives us cooldown. It's fantastic. So, on your chest, you're looking for secondaries like reduces damage from range attacks by 7%. You can also get that on the bracer. It's very nice. And let's talk about Paragon Points. So, very similar to a Condemned Crusader, you're going to want a lot of Wrath. You're going to want max movement speed, because remember, instead of a movement speed modifier, we have Phalanx damage on it. And then dump the rest into Strength. If you're really lacking in health, you can also go Vitality. Offense, this is what you're going to want to do. First priority, cooldown reduction. That is the #1 priority for any Crusader. Second, critical hit damage to 50. Third, you're going to want to put critical hit chance to 5%. Then the rest in attack speed. Attack speed is okay for this build. Again, much better than that of Condemned Crusader, but still not the best. For defense, your first 2 priorities are going to be Resist All and Armor. This provides a huge amount of mitigation. Then you're going to want to go life, and then life regeneration. Remember, everything's a balance, but generally, as long as you can maintain a decent amount of life, mitigation's great. Utility. First priority has got to be Life on Hit. Life on Hit gives you a lot of life back. Also, resource cost reduction. These are about equal, I would say. However, resource cost reduction is you don't get that much bang for your buck. So really, I would actually say this and this first. Then resource cost reduction. Then gold. So life on hit and area damage first, then resource cost reduction, then gold, fine. So there we go. I'm going to show you guys how this build works in a Greater Rift. I'm just going to go for a 38, just a basic one. for now, just to show you here. Here I go, throwing out my horses. One thing about this build is you're going to have to be really good at micromanaging your distance from your enemies and stopping. If you don't have a key bound to stop your character, you're going to have one for this build for sure. For me, it's the shift key. So if I want to stop in the middle of 2 attacks, I have to run out from those attacks and then hold shift, and then I can continue doing my burst. Now, it's easy to get stuck with this build and be in long hallways. So you want to kind of get behind mobs like I just did. Start throwing your horses so they hit the most possible enemies. Conserving your wrath is more important in this build also, compared to Crusader, the Condemned Crusader. So I'm holding shift so I can attack this mob. This is basically how it's done. See the arcane beams, you have to get off of them. Go back, do my iron skin if I need to. Back to work. Now, this build has some strengths and weaknesses as compared to the Condemned build. I'm going to get out of here in a second and show you guys that. But basically, it's harder to clear the greater rifts with this spec. You don't clear them as quickly. It's not as good of an AoE spec. It's a frontal attack. So it has that weakness. But it does have a benefit as well. Its benefit is that it does much more single target damage. When you're facing a Rift Guardian, you're spitting out these horses like this, I can't even describe how much more damage it is, especially with the Mirror Nade Gem. You get the Mirror Nade Gem proccing like crazy, you're going to do a huge amount of damage. I'm really jealous when I watch Crusaders with this spec kill the Rift Guardian because they can kill them so much faster. Its weakness is, like I said, you have to micromanage your character more. You can't just be running around doing condemns all in circles. You have to hold shift and avoid abilities sometimes. Like, oh, there's an arcane beam there. Oh, shift, I gotta stop there. Things like that. It has slightly less survivability than Condemn, because in Condemn you can run Iron Skin, plus you can also run your Indestructible passive. So if you run the Indestructible passive, like I said, that's like a third life, because we're already running Akarat's Champion with Prophet, which gives us an extra life, but on top of that, Indestructible also gives us an extra life. The big thing about this build is it's just better for single target. It's not as good as clearing the rifts, but you will do a lot more damage against the Rift Guardian. Another benefit is it's not quite as weapon dependent like I talked about before. So that's basically the basics of the Stampede build. I hope you enjoyed this guide. Take a look at my other guides on stream. I just wanted to help you guys out with this build. I think that this build will definitely see some use in Season 2, but I'm going to be gunning for Condemn because I believe it's slightly more viable. So, hope you guys enjoyed this, and peace.